They thought stealing my water would be easy. They were wrong. The HOA president shows up at 6 a.m. with a construction crew. And just like that, she starts ripping through my family's ranch like she owns the place. Your little cow pasture doesn't get to hold up progress, she sneers, waving legal papers in my face. But here's what Karen and Chief didn't know. That worthless spring my grandfather left me, it feeds their entire luxury subdivision. Every shower, every swimming pool, every perfectly manicured lawn. It's all my water. What would you do if your HOA started stealing your family's land in broad daylight? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. This story's about to get wild. My name's Jake Morrison, and I inherited 40 acres of prime ranch land from my grandfather in 2019. Nothing fancy, just rolling pasture, a natural spring that's been flowing since before Colorado was a state, and enough room for 50 head of cattle. The kind of place where you can still hear coyotes at night and smell leather from your work gloves mixed with morning coffee. Grandpa bought this land in 1952 for $800 with just a handshake. Back then, our nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Fast forward to today, and I'm surrounded by Whispering Pines Estates, a luxury subdivision where the cheapest house costs more than I'll make in 10 years. These aren't your typical rural neighbors. We're talking about folks who moved out here for the authentic ranch experience, but they're the first ones calling the county every time my cattle make noise during calving season. The irony tastes more bitter than burnt coffee. They wanted rural charm until they actually got it. Problems started small. Noise complaints when I'd run equipment before 7 a.m. Formal letters about unsightly hay storage. One memorable incident involved a woman demanding I install air fresheners on my cattle because the smell was affecting her yoga sessions. I wish I were making that up. But the real trouble started when Patty Blackwood became HOA president. Picture every nightmare boss you've ever had. Add a law degree and unlimited free time. Then give her authority over 847 families. Patty's 55, lives in the biggest house overlooking my ranch, and has turned harassment into an art form. Her husband, Rick, owns Blackwood Development, the company that built half the subdivisions in the county. Together, they're like a two-person wrecking crew for anyone who doesn't fit their vision of community standards. Patty's signature move? Showing up at your door with a thick stack of official-looking papers, speaking in legal jargon designed to intimidate. The sound of her designer heels clicking on marble floors became my personal horror movie soundtrack. The harassment escalated over 5 years. First came the letters typed on expensive letterhead, threatening legal action over everything from my truck's parking angle to the height of my fence posts. Then came the formal complaints, noise violations, zoning disputes, even a claim that my cattle were depressing property values through visual pollution. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real war started 3 months ago when I discovered surveyor marks running straight across my best pasture. Not along the property line, but directly through the middle of my land, connecting the subdivision's new clubhouse to the county water main 2 miles away. When I knocked on Patty's door that morning, I could smell the sprinkler system hitting her perfectly manicured lawn. She answered, wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill, holding a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet. "Oh, Jake," she said, like she was greeting a persistent door-to-door salesman. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "Figure what out, Patty?" I asked. "That you're running a pipeline across my land without permission?" She smiled, the kind of smile a shark give a wounded fish. "Right of necessity, sweetie. Your little cow pasture doesn't get to hold up progress for 847 families. We've got all the legal authority we need." She thrust those papers at me, and I'll admit, they looked impressive. Official seals, legal terminology, the works. But as I'd soon discover, looking official and being legal are two very different things. The texture of that expensive paper stock should have been my first clue. Real legal documents don't need premium printing to carry weight. That conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it changed everything because what Patty didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Grandpa's inheritance included more than just 40 acres of pasture. Monday morning, 6 a.m. sharp, I woke up to the sound of diesel engines rumbling across my pasture. Not the gentle hum of a pickup truck, but the deep, earth-shaking growl of a full excavation crew setting up shop on my land. I threw on boots and jogged out to find 5 guys in hard hats, trenching a 4-foot-deep pipeline directly through my prime grazing area. The foreman, a weathered guy named Carlos, looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Morning, I called out, trying to keep my voice level. Mind telling me what you're doing on my property? Carlos wiped sweat from his forehead and handed me a county permit. Got orders to run a water line from the subdivision to the main. Permit says we're good to go. I scanned the document. Official county seal, proper signatures, the works. But here's the thing about bureaucratic paperwork. It's only as good as the property description. And this one? Intentionally vague. Instead of specifying easement along the northern boundary, it just said necessary access through adjacent properties. That's when I learned my first legal lesson. Always demand to see the exact property survey attached to any permit. A legitimate easement will have precise measurements and clearly marked boundaries. If they're being vague about the location, they're probably being dishonest about their authority. The diesel fumes were making my eyes water as I watched these guys tear up 5 years of careful pasture management. My cattle were scattered to the far corner of the property, spooked by the noise and activity. Worse yet, the trenching was already turning my crystal-clear spring water muddy brown. Look, Carlos, I'm sure you're just doing your job, but nobody asked my permission for this. He shrugged apologetically. Take it up with the county, man. I just dig where they tell me. Fair enough. But while I was calling my attorney, Patty was already 3 moves ahead. By noon, I had an emergency injunction filed through the only lawyer in town who'd take my case, Bob, a semi-retired guy who mostly handled wills and divorces. Not exactly a heavyweight, but he was honest and cheap. The injunction would stop construction, but the court hearing wasn't scheduled for 3 weeks. That's when I discovered the beauty of small-town legal warfare. Construction can continue pending resolution of disputes. Convenient, right? But I'm not completely naive. Growing up on a ranch teaches you to prepare for trouble. So, I'd already set up trail cameras along the property line after finding those surveyor marks. Nothing fancy, just the kind hunters use to track deer movement. But they record everything in high definition. That afternoon, I posted no trespassing signs every 20 feet along the pipeline route. Probably overkill, but I wanted crystal clear documentation that this was private property. The twist came during dinner. My daughter, Emma, she's 16 and way smarter than me about most things, was doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone rang. "Dad," she said, looking up from her laptop, "I've been researching this water rights stuff for my civics project. Did you know that if they permanently lower the pressure in our spring, the ranch becomes unsuitable for cattle?" I hadn't thought about that, but she was right. Without reliable water, I'd have to sell the herd. Without the herd, the ranch would just become an expensive hobby property I couldn't afford to maintain. Emma overheard me talking to Bob later that night. "Honey," she said, "we might have to sell if this goes badly." The look on her face broke my heart. This land represented 4 generations of family history. And now, some suburban power couple was trying to steal it with fancy paperwork and legal intimidation. But Patty wasn't done. 2 days later, she filed a counter-complaint claiming I was disrupting essential infrastructure and endangering public health by interfering with the pipeline construction. The woman had brass. I'll give her that. Then came the whisper campaign. Patty organized an emergency HOA meeting where she painted me as the villain holding up progress. According to the meeting minutes Emma found online, I was now an environmental hazard whose industrial agriculture practices were threatening property values. The local newspaper, a weekly rag that survives mostly on real estate ads, ran a story titled, "Rancher versus Progress. Old Ways Block Community Growth." They used a photo of my property taken during the worst part of calving season, making it look like a disaster zone. But here's what Patty didn't count on. Emma's generation doesn't get their news from newspapers. She started documenting everything on TikTok, and suddenly we had a few thousand people following our story. The sound of hydraulic hammers breaking through shale became the soundtrack to viral videos about property rights. Sometimes the best defense is just showing people what's really happening. Patty's next move came disguised as community concern. 3 weeks after the pipeline drama started, a guy in a white coat and clipboard showed up at my gate, claiming to be an environmental consultant hired by the HOA to test my property for contamination. Standard procedure, he said, adjusting wire-rimmed glasses that screamed, "Trust me, I'm a scientist." He just needed to collect some soil and water samples to ensure my cattle operations weren't posing health risks to the community. The smell of his cologne mixed with morning dew created this weird chemical cocktail that should have been my first warning sign. Real environmental scientists don't bathe in aftershave before collecting samples. Dr. Gerald Hoffman, that's what his business card said, spent 4 hours taking pictures of every mud puddle, manure pile, and water trough on my property. He was particularly interested in photographing the spring from unflattering angles, making crystal clear water look contaminated through creative camera work. 2 weeks later, his preliminary findings hit the county health department like a bombshell. According to Dr. Hoffman's report, cattle runoff from my ranch posed significant health risks to the subdivision's water supply. Never mind that his water samples came from a puddle next to my equipment barn, not the actual spring. The county issued a formal investigation notice, suspending all ranch operations pending a comprehensive environmental review. Suddenly, I couldn't move cattle, spread hay, or basically do anything that looked like ranching while they decided whether my family's 70-year operation was a public menace. But here's where Rick's greed started showing. The same week my operations got suspended, Blackwood Development coincidentally submitted a bid to remediate my environmental problems through property purchase for about half what the land was worth. Naturally, that's when I started staying up nights, diving deep into county records and HOA and corporation documents. If you've never tried researching property law at 2 a.m., fueled by coffee and righteous anger, I don't recommend it. But sometimes insomnia pays off. It turns out Whispering Pines was built on a former mining claim. Those beautiful rolling hills used to be a copper mining operation that was filled in during the 1980s. The more I dug, the more interesting things got. Environmental consultant licenses are public record, and Dr. Hoffman's had expired 2 years ago. His environmental testing company was actually a shell corporation owned by, surprise, Rick's development company. The man testing my property for contamination was literally on my enemy's payroll. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save you thousands in legal fees. Always verify professional licenses through state databases before accepting any official sounding reports. Expired credentials are a red flag that usually means someone's trying to intimidate you with fake authority. I gathered all this evidence and presented it to the county health department. Within 48 hours, their investigation was quietly dropped. Funny how quickly bureaucrats lose interest when you prove their expert witness is a fraud.
Cảm ơn tất cả các bạn đã xem video.